Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whichever time zone is appropriate. We are so happy to have you join us for our wonderful global read with Bishop Bill Swing on his book, God and Nuclear Weapons. And I am going to start, this session is recorded, and I am going to start with a short PowerPoint, and then Marilyn Turkovich, the Charter's Executive Director, will take over and facilitate this session. And of course, I need to press share if I want this to work. So here we are. Here's our short PowerPoint. So this is today's program, God and Nuclear Weapons, Meditations at the End of the Atomic Age, is the book that we're focusing on. And here we have Marilyn and Bishop Swing. On Friday, we are very fortunate. On Friday, we have another global read. This one is on the book Being Noble by Livia Malcandro, and she will join us, and Joy Ngoma is going to be the facilitator for this event. I hope you will all join us for that as well. And then every Wednesday, so next Wednesday as well, at 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, Marilyn presents a global music program, The Harmony of Humanity. And here we have a short list of what is ahead. So we have on Thursday, Allies in Action, the US chat at 2 p.m., 40 Days of Peace. And in our 40 Days of Peace programming, the Community Collaboration Ambassador Program, and that is at 11 Pacific time. Then on Friday, the first Friday of the month, March 7th, we have our Healthcare Sectors Kitchen Table Chat. And on the 5th of March, we have an information session about our global program, the Compassionate Action Conference. And the actual conference is going to be May 14 and 15, but this is an information session so that you can learn whether you want to present or attend and what to do. And then we have, last but not least, on this session, on the 20th of March at 7:30 in the morning, the EdNet Forum, the Peace Leadership Model. And we conclude every month on Saturday at 9 a.m. with our wonderful Sangha. And I am going to stop sharing. And that's not how you do that. Here we are. And I'm going to pass it on to Marilyn Turkovich. Thanks very much, Marilyn.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Well, this is a real honor for me today to be with Bishop Swing. We've been together, I would say, for the last several years. You're going to find out what an extraordinary person Bishop Swing is. And all of the things that he's done besides writing this book, God and Nuclear Weapons. But this is a legacy. This is who Bill Swing is. And I'm excited to share him with you. And let me give you a little bit of background information, and he can correct me if I'm making any mistakes. He comes from West Virginia originally, but I think that it's fair to say that he's been a Californian for quite some time, serving as the Episcopal Bishop of California for over 20 years, over 25 years, really. And he has been an inspiration and shown leadership in a number of areas, including dealing with the homelessness problem that has been prevalent throughout California, addressing the HIV and AIDS crisis in San Francisco. But in 1993, a momentous thing happened, and it was inspired by an invitation from the United Nations to host an interfaith session commemorating the 50th anniversary of the UN Charter. And Bishop Schling did that, but he also at that time envisioned a whole new organization that would bring together individuals and organizations from different interfaith groups. And he formed something called URI, the United Religions Initiative. And this is where I met Bill Swing at a celebration of another anniversary for URI at Stanford University. And as a part of that gathering, there was a separate meeting in which Bishop Swing decided that he wanted to bring together people who were really concerned about what was going on in the world and what a crisis point we were at because of nuclear weapons. And he envisioned a circle, which URI is famous for, having circles around the world, but to concentrate that circle on nuclear weapons and really living a life free of nuclear weapons. And there's a lot that I think we'll address about the circle and about the book. So let me just say hi to Bishop Swing, which I've already done, but now for the purpose of this session, I'll do it again. And, if it's okay with you, Bill, do you want to say something about the book first? Or do you just want to me to just kind of ask you a few questions?
Yeah, how about you asking me some questions? Because when we get in the book, I'll never see you again.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess maybe the first question is, why did you write this book? This whole complex relationship that exists between faith and nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I was asked to give a talk on this subject to about 350 people. And so I wrote this speech, about 45 minutes, and people were really interested. And so I kind of thought, okay, I'm also working on thinking of taking the Gospel of Mark and going into the book of Acts and seeing how we go from the birth of Jesus to the early church. And so I was thinking about writing on early church doctrine, etc. And then also I had the speech. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, I'll just put them together and see how the mythology and theology and historical record, as well as the poetry and the visions and everything, how does all that mesh with your weapons? Then I got only so far in the book, and then I talked to a friend named Marilyn up in state of Washington. She said, you ought to talk to this guy. And I talked to the guy. And the guy said, well, you ought to, there's another dimension that this book ought to have that isn't in there. And I said, well, what about making that the George Shultz dimension? And because I had spent a lot of time with George Shultz, the Secretary of State, et cetera, et cetera. And we worked together on nuclear weapons. So I thought, okay, I'll make this book sort of a love letter to George. And it'll have several dimensions to it. It'll be kind of my speech, and it'll be theologically in context of theology, and it'll also be a tribute to George. And if you don't mind, I'll just say a word about George. A long time ago, he said to me, why don't you come down to Stanford? I've got a whole bunch of people working on nuclear weapons, and I'd like you to listen to everybody. So I said, fine. So he put me up in the balcony, and here were these physicists, and they were authors and Russians and admirals and people who worked on nuclear weapons every day of their life. And I was upstairs for 2 days just taking notes as fast as I could. And I didn't have a thought in my head other than, what did he say? How do I write this down? Okay, I gotta learn what this means. And then after 2 days, with all these experts from all over the world, he stopped the whole meeting. He looked up into the balcony and he said, "Bill, what do you think?" Gosh, I didn't think. I was just taking notes, and it threw me up against the wall. And I you know, if you're a clergy person, you're loquacious enough to get out of most situations. So I said something, and but the question is, Bill, what do you think? I wanted to make the book to the reader. What do you think? I've spent a lot of years going into deeper dimensions using nuclear weapons and faith and prayer and God and mythology, etc. And so, when nuclear weapons, you don't want to think about it. It's the last thing you want to think. It's depressing. It's not life-giving. And so to have somebody say, what do you think? And down deep inside you, what do you think? That means you're being called out. And so in the book, I wanted to say, George, he's dead now. He lived to be 100 years old, and on his 100th birthday, he inaugurated the Youth Award for Europe. Young people who for their issues, who get it. And that's kind of guy he is. On his 100th birthday, he starts a youth movement.
Yeah.
So that's it. I wanted to give a tribute to George.
And it is quite the tribute. I know that, you know, when we first started the Voices group, it was amazing because there were so many incredible people who were part of it. Some of them have gone, like Secretary Shultz. But I'm kind of wondering, why is it that people need to know about nuclear weapons and where we are right now in the world, and why we are so vulnerable? And, why is it not part of our big concern?
Yeah, I think it's too hot to handle. When the Ukrainian war broke out, there were two movies that came out in the first year of the Ukrainian war, or the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And one of them was Barbie, and one of them was Oppenheimer. And in Ukraine, the movie Barbie broke all records of attendance. And so here's poor old Ukraine, and right above it is Belarus, and Belarus says, okay, Russia wants us to drop some tactical nuclear weapons on you. And these people are living underneath the threat of nuclear weapons every day. And what do? Do they go see Oppenheimer and think about where all this started and go deeper into the issue, or do they go to Barbie doll? They go to Barbie doll. It's to me, that's indicative of it's too big. It's you can't get your arms around it, and you don't want to. And so I think we give away, as a society, worldwide society, I think we give away the issue to anybody who wants to exploit it. So if you're part of the military industrial complex, and you can make a lot of money on this, you got a green light to go out and do what you want. Build a bigger one, build a faster one, build more of them, etc. So I think human beings just want to abdicate their responsibility, because it's just too big.
I know we've had this discussion before, but I'm wondering, like with the younger generation, um, do they really know how critical this is? I would say they don't. I could be wrong, but what can we do to awaken them to this threat that is ever present as a global issue?
Yeah, and that gets into the psychology of fear. If the young people really understood what was going on, it might cause such it's depressing news, and it might bring a lot of depression. So you don't want to give too much too early, etc. On the other hand, well, they also watch movies and television shows and other kind of shows, streaming shows, where there are nuclear bombs. There are forces from alien forces that come in and blow up everything. And in one sense, they're used to nuclear weapons as entertainment.
Hmm.
They're not used to nuclear weapons as reality. So how do you get them to move from fantasy and escape to what's going on, and where do you need to be involved? So as you know, Marilyn, you and I work on trying to get young people, trying to find young people who are doing things on nuclear weapons, and we find them, and they're out there, and they're all over the world, and how to raise them up, and how to let their peers know that these young people are onto something, and how to say this is a great worth. And the older generation would salute you royally if you bent your soul and mind in the direction of what to do about nuclear weapons.
You know, I'm wondering if you could channel Secretary of State Shultz and Mikhail Gorbachev, who the Youth Award is named after, that Voices gives to young people who are out there trying to really inform other youth around the world about the threat of nuclear weapons. So if you could channel these two individuals, what would they say to young people?
I know what I know their concern, rather than what they would say. Their concern was that back in the 80s, when they were going to Reykjavik to work on reducing the number of warheads, um, uh, the world the world was awake. And then before that, when the Cuban Missile Crisis back in 1962, the world was awake to nuclear weapons. So awake, and then it went to sleep. And these two fellows they know what it's like to see an awakened world. It was so awake that they got it from 70,000 warheads down to 60 to 50 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10 to how about getting rid of all of them? They actually, two people in a room felt it so deeply that they said, look, what about getting rid of every nuclear weapon now before it takes off in multiple directions? And they couldn't do it because folks back home wouldn't put up with it. And because they wanted to put safeguards like a thing in the sky to protect them. But they lived through times where young people got it. And now they, at the end of their life, they lived in a time when the young people didn't get it. And that's why they started the youth award. Please help us get these people to open their eyes about what's going on.
Yeah, when I first started teaching, there was the group Physicians for Social Responsibility, and then followed Educators for Social Responsibility. And there were some really powerful videos that were out there to help adults and youth understand the threat. And I just remember the power of showing some of those videos to people and their response. And I'm just wondering, we don't want history, obviously, to repeat itself, but we need to grab hold of history, obviously, to help everyone understand what this nuclear situation is. And, the subtitle of your book is Meditations at the End of the Atomic Age. So, where are we at the end of this atomic age?
And, um, one of the little tiny blips of hope that comes, and he might not be serious, he might be playing the field, but the President of the United States recently said, I need to sit down with the head of Russia and the head of China to work on reducing the amount of money we're putting in. He's very money-centered. And he said we should not be putting in trillions of dollars into nuclear weapons. Well, if that has even a modicum of truth to it, what a wonderful thing that is, could be. Because when you really get down to it, it has been America, Russia, America, Russia. And now it's beginning to be America, Russia, China. And Chinese are doing great things. They're big, they're advancing their submarines, they're advancing a lot of things. I see that as kind of the only thing on the horizon. I see aroused people doing things. And non-proliferation treaty, and the treaty with Russia is running out, and when that one runs out, there's no binding treaty left in the world. It's the Wild West again. We've gone from having Russia and America working together on this, and having other treaties, and then having each treaty drop. And then there's only one treaty in it, and it's about to drop. So you got two things. You got aroused citizenry, or you've got some leader of some country who says, for whatever reason, even if it's economic, we've got to stop this or change this.
So how do you see the role of interfaith dialogue in really pulling this issue up and advancing the cause of nuclear disarmament?
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects to interfaith. One is if you take the Roman Catholic Church, having a dialogue with Islam, that's part of interfaith. But a dialogue isn't exactly action. And it's only been going on for about 60 years. The religions have been around thousands of years, and dialogue between them has only been going on your fingers, both hands, less than that. The trouble with religion is twofold. One is that the head of almost every religion says these are evil, it's terrible, nuclear weapons, we got rid of them, get rid of them, get rid of them. And nobody does anything about it.
Mhm.
And you say, well, how about in your churches on Sunday? Does anybody preach about nuclear weapons? No. Does anybody have seminars about nuclear weapons? No. Do you confront the congregation on it? No. Well, why not? Because the people don't want to hear about it, and they don't want, and the preachers don't want to be unpopular. They don't want to say things that will get them in trouble. So at the top of religion, it's pretty good across the board. But in reality, religion doesn't do much. So then you get into, well, what could enter religion if you got charter for compassion or religions for peace or something that deals with people from all kinds of traditions? Is it possible to have a third rail or a third approach to nuclear weapons? If religions are hypocritical about it, could interfaith be true about it? And therefore, I think it's incumbent upon all of us in the interreligious realm to do our job about nuclear weapons, teaching, advocating, arousing, preaching, etc. about nuclear weapons.
So how do we go about doing this? You know, what responsibilities do interfaith leaders have to getting the message out about nuclear weapons?
Yeah. If you get a group like Back from the Brink,
Mhm.
they'll get a catalog of all the religious groups in the world that have a stance against nuclear weapons. And they try to coordinate, light a fire under, increase communication, leader to leader, youth to youth, anything they can do. College students, they're working with chaplains now on university campuses to get the student bodies of campuses alert to the idea through the chaplains. So there are things that are happening.
Can you, perhaps there's some people listening who don't know anything about Back from the Brink. If you could just make a little introduction to them, and maybe we could encourage people to get more involved with them, as well as people to get more involved with our own circle of voices for a nuclear-free world.
Yeah. There are several things that are just quite outstanding about Back from the Brink people. If somebody says, I want to do something, they'll give you 5 things. You can get into no first use. You can get these are 5 practical things that anybody, any place in America or in the world would do. So they're terrific like that. And secondly, they're not trying to corner the market. They want to help. They want to introduce person to person. They want to be an interlocutor. They're not trying to glorify Back from the Brink or get enough customers or something like that. What they're trying to do is to make sure that this group knows about that. And why don't you all talk to each other? I have great admiration for these people.
Yeah. And thank you, Joan, for putting in the website for Back from the Brink. And I think, Joan, if you wouldn't mind also putting in the Voices website too, because we'd like people to come and visit the website. I sound like I'm owning it a little bit because,
Okay.
because the charter is closely aligned with URI, but especially with the Voices group. So how can interfaith put some pressure on political leaders in addressing the threat of nuclear weapons? Can we?
Yeah. You go to the Supreme Court, 6 members of the Supreme Court are Roman Catholic. 2 are Protestant, and 1 is Jewish. So then the question would be, 2/3 of the Supreme Court is Roman Catholic. How about the Congress or the meeting of Catholic bishops in America?
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty good. And Archbishop Wester, John Wester, he's excellent on this subject, and he tries to bring pressure to that august and important assembly. So, okay, there are 2 Protestants in the Supreme Court, 1 Jewish person. I think if the Protestant Church raised its voice, I think the Supreme Court would hear it. Dealing with the president, I just don't think that nuclear weapons is a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's not a conservative or a liberal issue. If the bombs drop, they drop on the Republicans and the Democrats alike. One of the things with nuclear weapons is to try to keep them away from being partisan. Nuclear weapons are neutral. And like Noah's flood, the flood that took over the whole world in the myth, that wasn't a conservative or liberal flood. It was a universal flood. And if you got that kind of thinking, yeah, I got the picture. Okay, well, instead of flood, let's just put bombs. Same thing. So what can you do? Your legislators, you go from the Supreme Court to the White House to the legislators. I think you really have to start at the local level. All politics is local.
Right.
And so I think if we really believe that and own that, then it would be city councils. It would be little things to vote on in November or whatever.
We live in this interconnected world. And so, if we look at almost any issue, we can find ways that, like a spider web, we're all connected to these issues. And so, as you say, everything, politics starts at the community level, and even, recognizing that we can have this community concern and actually act. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the sources of hope that you can identify right now in the world in which we're living, as we try desperately, I think, to build community?
You're not talking about hope across the board. You're talking about hope in terms of nuclear weapons.
I think maybe I'm talking about hope generally, as providing some structure for community. And then how is it that we can see the interconnectedness of issues? For example, climate change is a huge issue that we're facing every single day in every nook and cranny of the globe. Nuclear weapons are there and could there could be an accident, and we could talk in a minute or two about the group of the atomic scientists and where we are on this clock that we're constantly facing. So I think that, maybe just hope generally, and then hope to bring people together, and then hope to really give each other encouragement to move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess if we say in nuclear weapons warheads, we've gotten them from 70,000 down to 13,000. Well, that's a long way down. If we could do that, and we've done it, then we just hope that we can get it from 13 down to 10, down to, I mean, this is not a magic wand thing. Nuclear weapons were built from the atom up, and they've got to be taken down to the atom. So there are some good things. And you can approach it from, like the president approaches nuclear weapons now from an economic, not a moral, or a spiritual, or a theological, an economic thing. Okay, that's great. If that is what it takes to reduce them, right? Pragmatically, that's good. Hope. In terms of the environment, nuclear weapons is the #1 issue in the environment. A lot of the environmental things take hundreds of years, et cetera, et cetera. Nuclear weapons takes 30 minutes, 15 minutes, and we're on our way to an ice age. You can't get more environmental than that. And so if people could see nuclear weapons as an environmental issue, even if they don't see it as theological or the money or superiority or deterrence or whatever, if we could just get the world to see nuclear weapons from the environmental point of view, that would really be hopeful. Because the world is waking up, and the statistics keep coming in about the harm that we're doing to the world, and how the world is letting us know that it's not working. So human beings have been problem solvers, and it's hard to discount human beings in terms of hope. They have. We all have. We're people of hope.
So, Bill, it almost looks like we have dropped the issue of nuclear weapons from the forefront of our thinking, and to a certain extent, depending on what time in history we were born, or place, we might not even realize how imposing and what a threat they are to us. So that it looks like education is prime here. Education in a lot of different ways. Just understanding some of the horrific events that are associated with nuclear weapons, whether it was a direct drop like it was in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or if it was an accident. So it looks as if both our organizations and the others that we have mentioned have this responsibility of helping people understand this nuclear threat. And I'm just wondering, I just looked here. I asked Joan if she would be so kind as to, if she could do it, paste the nuclear prayer in the chat, because one thing I think I'd like you to speak to the fact that there is such a thing as the nuclear prayer, and how did it come about? And maybe we'll be able to get it up here so that we can share it with people.
Sure. Back in the day when there was Bill Perry, Secretary of Defense, George Shultz, Secretary of State, Ambassadors Goodby and Tom Graham and Sidney Drell, the great physicist. When we would get together, we just took off and just started talking. And then I said, well, wait a minute, why don't we start our meetings with a prayer? I'll write one. So I wrote a prayer and started saying it every week, every month. And somebody, Monica Willard, picked it up and said, this prayer is so important. We ought to there. So she took it to the United Nations, and she took it around the world, and she had all kinds of people praying this particular prayer. And then we said, well, wait a minute, this is just our prayer. How about other people having their own prayers? When it gets right down to it, the military industrial complex, they've got the money, they've got the power. Well, what do we got? Well, we got a prayer. Don't give up on your prayer. So that's where you start. You start in your heart. Prayer could be anything. It could be quiet. It could be an intention. It could be a meditation. It could be whatever. But Jimmy Durante used to sing the song. It said the song has to come from your heart. And he had a terrible voice, and he was a great singer. And the reason he was a good singer is because it came from his heart. That's what a prayer. That's what prayer is. So got to come from your heart.
And I think that good prayer brings us hope. It brings us comfort, and to a certain extent, the nuclear prayer is so important because it keeps alive the issue. And while you were talking, I realized that I could probably just go and find it, which I did. Apologies to Joan, but I think that we can share it with people who are here, because I think it's so important. And let me see if I can. And you'll see a central player in this is Bishop Swing himself.
Yeah. Oh my, yeah.
Say, whenever we get together.
I am Bill Perry. I'm a professor emeritus in the engineering school at Stanford University. I was the 19th Secretary of Defense of the United States, and before that, the Director of Defense Research and Engineering. My experiences through the years with nuclear weapons have made an indelible impression on me and convinced me that these immensely powerful weapons threaten no less than our own civilization. This has led me to make the primary task of my life working to ensure that they will never, ever be used again.
My name is Sidney Drell. I am a scientist, a physicist. Beyond my academic teaching and research career, I have spent many years as an advisor to the United States government on technical national security issues and nuclear weapons in particular. I recognize their almost unimaginable destructive potential and their capacity for destroying the human race. This is a capacity far beyond what we were created to acquire, and therefore I believe and work to get rid of these weapons as soon as practical before they destroy humanity.
My name is George Shultz, former Secretary of State under President Ronald Reagan, and this is my own prayer. Dear God, Please bring common sense and divine guidance to our work on the problems that nuclear weapons pose to our world. Man has invented a means to destroy us all. We must eliminate these weapons in order to preserve a sane and peaceful world. We pray for your help as we work toward this goal.
I am Ambassador James Goodby, and the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki have shaped my soul and my professional life, from my participation in the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty to my present efforts at seeking to dismantle, jointly with the Russians, the nuclear weapons legacy of the Cold War. President Kennedy said, "Here on Earth, God's work must truly be our own." I think that God's work is to rid the world of the present nuclear threat.
I am Monica Willard. The issue of eliminating nuclear weapons has shaped my life as a peace activist and as the representative of the United Religions Initiative to the United Nations. Knowing that nuclear weapons can be used by choice or accident, and that they have the capacity to destroy our planet and everything we love, calls me to action. A world without nuclear weapons is protection. For the love of our children, grandchildren, and future generations, for the beauty of the natural world, for a safer future, I offer this prayer.
I'm Jonathan Granoff. As a young man interning for a congressman, I met then Senator Robert Kennedy. He told us how close we came to destroying civilization during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He told us that eliminating nuclear weapons before they eliminate us is the practical and moral litmus test of our time. For many decades since, I've worked as an activist, an international lawyer, and a human being to rid the world of this threat. We need each other to do this, and we need God's grace.
I am Ambassador Thomas Graham, first with the Soviet Union, and later with countries all over the world. I have participated in arms limitation policy development and negotiations on behalf of the United States of America. Always, the overarching objective has been to control and eventually eliminate all nuclear weapons. And although much has been achieved in the past 70 years, the sword of mass destruction still hangs precariously over our heads. As long as there is breath in my lungs and urgency in my heart, I intend to do all in my power to banish these ungodly weapons from the face of the earth.
The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe.
And in our hands you have placed the fate of this planet.
We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will
Turn to you in sober fear and in intoxicating hope.
We ask for your guidance, and we wish to share in your imagination as we deliberate about nuclear force.
Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness
that hovers so pervasively over our Earth, your Earth,
so that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light.
Bless all of us who wait today for your presence
and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace
and rightful equilibrium on Earth.
In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Amen.
Amen.
Today, the doomsday clock stands at 3 minutes till midnight, the highest level ever recorded. Instead of global alarm and efforts at reduction, the opposite is happening. Nuclear nations are quietly gearing up to modernize and create new and more powerful nuclear weapons. Rogue nations are neglecting their citizens in favor of advancing their nuclear status. Rogue terrorist groups are frantically trying to obtain nuclear materials and weapons. Nuclear weapons are built to be used sooner or later. But rather than stepping back from the brink, the world is dashing to plunge over the cliff. In this moment of nuclear madness, what can we do? The nuclear experts whom I know pray. They live into the direction that their prayers take them. They become advocates, and they join with others to build a global voice of nuclear abolition. We invite you to do the same. Our little group is called Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, and we are part of the United Religions Initiative. If we can help you find your voice, feel free to reach out to us at uri.org. In case you think that your moral, spiritual voice is in the minority, please know every major religious group in the world has called for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Follow the prayer that is in your soul. Raise your voice. Save the world.
Every time I see that, it's so important. It's so convincing. It hits right at the heart. And I think the passion of the issue. So thank you for putting that together. I'm not sure whoever put it together initially, but it's such an important part of the legacy of, of the movement.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's not that this piece is dated, because it really isn't, but I had asked maybe if you could say something about the nuclear clock, because at the time that this was made, it was at 3 minutes too, and now there's been a revision within, I think, the last few weeks.
Yeah, and it's more like 1 minute. I think it's 1 minute and 10 seconds or something.
Yeah, it's I think it's 80 seconds. I'm not positive, but
the Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and the bellicose voice of Putin, the guy in Belarus, Lukashenko. They keep bringing this up, and China keeps saying we're advancing it. So it's saber rattling. It's the people who really have it's only the United States that's keeping a guarded mouth about this. The guy in North Korea, he's always talking about taking on Japan, South Korea, America, et cetera, et cetera. So the rhetoric is raised, and also the volatile nature of Ukraine. It's kind of like the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's more like that than a normal time. And I was with the movie Oppenheimer, I was hoping that all the audiences would get it. But they don't. I talk to young people and say, what do you think about that movie? And I say, well, the lighting was terrific and great acting. And don't you think that guy deserves an Academy Award? Wait a minute, you missed it. You missed it. So, and then the nuclear, when you're talking about the clock, the doomsday clock, you think, well, is that some spurious bunch of people who are just alarmists? That was founded by Albert Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer. These are not lightweight people, alarmists. These are people who look the demon in the eye. And then, in the old days, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, there were 2 nations with bombs, and now there are 9 nations with bombs. And now the bombs are bigger and more powerful. And pretty soon it'll be not 9, but 12, and then it'll be 15, and then bigger, more. And that's the reason Reagan and Gorbachev got together in the first place. Said, this is crazy. They were two farm boys, by the way. They were not city boys. They came from the earth, and said the soil, the forest, the land can't tolerate these weapons. And so they could, from their context, they could see it. It wasn't the context of money or power, in the context of earth, dirt, life. So,
Yeah. You know, the power of the film that we just saw, which obviously had an introduction to the nuclear prayer itself. And by the way, Joan was able to cut and paste it into the chat. So if people want to save the chat, you'll have the prayer. And I think each of the people that we saw in the forefront of the prayer talked about their own personal prayers, so that the nuclear prayer is there for our reflection and consideration, but certainly to make it our own is as important. But it was the voices that we heard, just like you said, the Atomic Scientists Organization was founded by Einstein and Oppenheimer. And they did it for a reason, because they both saw the power of destruction that had been created. And as we listened to each person in the film, that message was so clear. It was so stirring and moving. And I think somehow that is what's missing right now. We need multiple bishop swings who are out there constantly telling us about this, and the commitment that each person that led that introduction to the prayer was making. And I know that that's true for a number of those people who are still alive, who are part of Voices, who continue with that urgency, that commitment. And I think, that's what we need to do. We need to instill that commitment. And I'm wondering, one of the things about the Charter for Compassion that's been kind of really very interesting is that people have picked up the charter, and there are college groups who've made the Charter for Compassion recitation, and people from different communities and in different languages. And I'm wondering if that isn't where we are, that we want to get this nuclear prayer said by so many people, and maybe make different versions of it. And so, we're at the end of our time, but I think there's some incredible lessons that we've certainly directed the conversation to today. But I'm wondering, Bill, if you have some inspiration that you want to leave us with?
Let's see, I'm an 88-year-old man. I used to be the bishop of the diocese. Most of life is behind me. But when you get to a point where it's not about what's your job or your profession or it gets down to going in the park and seeing the little children find their legs while they run. It's watching the dogs. It's prance around. It's watching the blooms begin to come in the spring, and to think that we could be vile enough to stop all this stuff is if you add all the Hitlers and the Mussolinis and the Khmer Rouges and you put them all together, they're nothing compared to these bombs. They're child's play. And just to keep at it till you see it in its context. It's one thing to say, they could blow up the whole world. Well, okay, what are they blowing up? Tell me. let's get specific here. Your parents got your children, your grandchildren, everything. Food, supplies. Anyway. So I want to go out swinging.
Well, I think you definitely are.
That's last name.
You know, I mean, Bishop Swing, the legacy builder. And, you know, I'm going to bridge to our next global read, which is Being Noble. And you are one of those noble people that is really committed to doing a number of things besides, you know, the founding of URI and fostering interfaith dialogue and really working towards global peace. Um, you really push people to, I think, a new level of understanding and certainly cooperation, and hope all of this will lead to lasting peace. And thank you so much for what you offered today.
Great to be your companion.
And by the way, it's a wonderful, quick read, but very, very inspirational. And once you read it, you're going to want to come back and read it in sections. So take care, Bill. See you at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Marilyn.
Everyone for participating. Bye.
Take care. Bye.